Hello everyone and welcome to the fifth and final talk in Music Network's professional development course for musicians, taking charge of your performance career, performing online. My name is Sarah Ledwidge and I'm going to be your host today. If I could ask everybody to please keep your mics muted for the presentations until we reach the Q&A at the end. And it's your choice whether you'd like to have your video on or off. But I'd recommend you switch to speaker view so that you can see the presenters really clearly. You'll find speaker view up in the right-hand corner of your screen. So just to let you all know that you'll receive a PDF via email, which will outline the key points from today and contain any links, etc. This session is also being recorded and will be available to view on the Music Network YouTube channel from January. So the format of this session will be each of our three speakers will speak for about 20 minutes on their topic, and then we'll take questions at the end. Since we're quite a small-ish number today, I think it'll be okay to just raise your hand and I'll invite you to take your mic off and ask your question at the end. So I'm going to give a brief introduction to each speaker before I hand over. Xenia Pestova Bennett is a concert pianist and composer who also runs a well-being practice, providing coaching in yoga, performance anxiety, and generalized anxiety management. Liz Doherty is a fiddle player and arts consultant who has recently launched I Teach Trad, a professional development course for teachers of traditional music. And Gwendolyn Mason is a concert violinist, teacher, and author who recently launched the Exhale, an online holistic retreat for musicians. So welcome to anybody just joining us. I'm going to hand over now to our first speaker, Xenia.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So I hope that you can all hear me and see me. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you very, very much to the Music Network for organizing this fantastic series of professional development events. And it's really wonderful to be able to share this virtual space with all of you. Thank you very much for coming. And I'm also really excited to be sharing the panel with Liz and Gwendolyn. So really wonderful to be asked. I would like to start with perhaps a slightly unconventional approach. So throughout my presentation, I would like us to have three little mini self-inquiries. So you might find it helpful to have an old-fashioned piece of paper and pen handy, if there is one around. And otherwise, of course, you're welcome to take notes on your device, on your computer, if that is available. But don't worry, it's absolutely not essential. So only for yourself if this is something you want to review later. So before I tell you about my work, let's start with a little self-inquiry. So I'm going to drop in two questions, and you don't have to answer them in public. This is very much personal and private. It's for you only, so there's no need to share this. So let's begin by just sitting comfortably. First of all, noticing how we are sitting. What is our position in space? Perhaps if the arms or legs are crossed, just releasing them, placing the feet on the floor to make sure that we are comfortable, whether we're sitting or standing or lying down, whatever this might be, because we're in the comfort of our own homes. Noticing the body, maybe releasing any little bits of tension, because as we stare at the screen, sometimes we have a tendency to get sucked in and our posture starts to be impacted by this tunnel vision focus. So noticing our peripheral vision, releasing anything. And I would like to ask you, what would make you truly happy? So even if it sounds a little bit new agey, just bear with me for a moment. We will come back to this. What is it that would make you truly happy right now? So ask yourself, what would make me truly happy? And this could be, let's say, worldly things, places, people, things, or for lack of a better term, more spiritual pursuits, so whatever it might be, long-term or short-term in the current situation, and looking forward, what would make you truly happy? Feel free to jot this down if anything comes to mind. Not necessarily an easy question to answer. And the second question, what is it that you have at your disposal right now? Any tools, approaches that can help support you in the current situation and in general, long term? Any tools that can help with physical health, mental well-being, and so on. And if nothing comes to mind, then that's also okay. So perhaps something to revisit further down the line. So putting these thoughts and notes aside for now, we'll revisit them, but I will tell you now why I am asking. And this is because I would like to give you some context to what I do and how I came to do what I do now. And it's quite a long story. So I'd like to rewind back about 10 years ago, when I was in my early 30s and just finished an advanced degree in a big North American city at a fancy educational institution, and had absolutely no tools at my disposal to support my well-being whatsoever. Was feeling completely lost, very, very unhappy, didn't have work, didn't know what to do. So I had a few gigs, but very little ways of supporting myself financially, as well as emotionally and in terms of my health. And I was living in a sort of a sublet dive apartment and eating junk food, stressing and running around, and then managed to get some teaching work, which happened to be a full-time teaching position at another educational institution halfway around the world in a different country, and immediately got sucked into a very demanding administrative role, and just struggled to perform at the same time, constant feelings of self-doubt, working all the time, or thinking that I was working all the time, when in fact I was getting sucked into endless email and social media at the same time, practicing very, very sporadically. I sustained a debilitating performance injury. I had to stop playing for a year, and I was really struggling with a lot of stress and anxiety, performance anxiety, imposter syndrome, at the same time going through emotional trauma following a death of a close person. So it was just a really, really crazy time. And as I said before, I had absolutely no ways to support myself through any of this. So the kind of overused analogy of not being able to pour from an empty cup is apt here. And the reason I want to say this is because that's when I began a kind of a very, very long search, trying to find these ways to support myself, which were not available during my educational process. And this is changing now. Of course, for musicians, we have a lot more resources available. But at the time, it was very, very difficult to talk about this with teachers, with peers, and also to find approaches. So I went on and looked for ways to, first of all, support myself. So the reason I wanted to share this with you is because it didn't really come as any sort of a business strategy or trying to think, oh yes, I would like to share these approaches with people. It came, first of all, from wanting to work in my own life. So I started doing trainings, I started researching, I've identified movement practices that helped me. I found breathwork approaches that really helped elicit the relaxation response and balance autonomic arousal. And I went through a lot of trial and error and tried many different focus approaches to help with concentration, relaxation, anxiety management. So eventually this led to teaching in these areas as well, and I went on to do yoga teacher trainings. So I did a series of trainings. So let's fast forward now to about 2017, 2018, when I finally started getting professional qualifications in these areas. And again, this was not with any view to teach, so I had no plans to teach. I just thought, well, it would be great to do these trainings for myself. So again, I'm stressing this as a kind of it was a personal project. And then I started gradually sharing with others. So I'd like us to do a second mini self-inquiry here, just to pause here, take a moment and ask yourself, is there an existing interest that you have that perhaps relates to your music making, or could be even separate? It could be even a hobby or just something you're excited about. Or is there a new interest, a recent interest, something that can be nurtured? Is there anything that you already do that you can share with others, perhaps in a different context? And it's not a bad question to ask ourselves occasionally anyway, to widen our interests and just to see what is this. Maybe some of you already have a very clear idea of what that is. Maybe for some of you it's not something you've thought about. So let's just take a pause and see if anything at all comes to mind. So I would like to fast forward to March, when all of my concerts got cancelled. And in the meantime, I gave up full-time teaching, reduced my contract, and moved from London, where I was living at the time, to a small seaside town to be closer to nature. And so, of course, I reduced my reliable teaching contract and reliable salary, and suddenly the pandemic hit. So I found myself in a very uncertain situation. And at this time, I took a pause. So I decided to use the time to research a new project. And I didn't want to rush myself. Again, there was no business strategy or particular goal to earn a certain income by a certain time or anything like that. And I think it is important, if at all possible, if we can, also to feel that we can pause and take this time to mourn what is happening, to digest, to reflect, to think, and then maybe research, think about what we can do. So I wanted to do something that I enjoy, and I enjoy performing, of course, very much, and I love music very much. I wanted to use my existing skills, and I wanted to share things with people. So wellness work seemed like an obvious choice. And I thought, well, of course, my work in anxiety management using yoga interventions can be really interesting to expand on. So I wanted to use these existing skills, but also build and learn new skills. And I think transferable skills are important for us as musicians, as performers. We already have so much that we know how to do, and we can certainly build on this. But at the same time, of course, I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do. So I had to also start from scratch in certain ways. And I can very much recommend a book that if you're interested in starting an online business, and particularly if it has anything at all to do with wellness, there's a fantastic book called The Wellpreneur by Amanda Cook, and I will circulate this afterwards in the list of resources. And she gives some really excellent ideas for starting out. So one of the first strategies is to think about identifying your market. So there's no use in trying to offer our services, whatever we do, to sort of all people and be all things to all people. And of course we know that's the case, but it's not necessarily obvious when we think about what we can do. So the first step is to do market research. And the best way to do it is to ask people what they need. So after doing some thinking, I've decided I would like to work with musicians, but perhaps not necessarily professional musicians, because as I said before, there are now increasing resources available in educational institutions in terms of anxiety management. Finally, this is changing, but it's not always readily available for non-professional musicians. So this is the area that I've identified as my primary area. And I reached out to as many people as I could and asked them if I could interview them. So just 15 minutes of someone's time, asking 3 questions about what it is that they would like to see, what do they need. And this was tremendously helpful. So I interviewed about 20 people, and of course you can do a lot more than that. And it was a very nice way to connect, and also of course at the end of the conversation you can say, well, is it okay if I keep in touch with you, if I offer trainings or products in the future? So it's a lovely way to also build up a connection, build up a mailing list. And I realized that there are certain things that maybe I know what I think people need, but it's quite different from what they think they need. I was really struck, for example, by how many musicians sabotage themselves by self-criticism. So one of the first things I did was I devised a free workshop on working with our inner critic and managing our performance anxiety in terms of ways of thinking and dealing with and befriending self-criticism. And after that, I went on to develop an online course in performance anxiety. So this was, again, a great way to start building an audience, start connecting with people. And when people joined the free seminar, then some of them also went on to do the course, which was really, really nice. So you build a relationship as well that way with your clients, for lack of a better term. And if you're interested, I can also send you a recording of one of my free online webinars on the inner critic. So I can also add that into the resources at the end. So that was really interesting. And in terms of building this relationship, I can't stress how important this is. I know that when we think about running a business, running an online business, and I would be very interested to hear from our other panel presenters today, but we might feel quite overwhelmed in thinking that we have to advertise ourselves very aggressively all the time online. So social media, of course, we might think, yes, we must have a very, very prominent social media presence. And turns out that this is not necessarily true. We don't have to be really active across all social media platforms all the time in order to build a meaningful connection with people. It is a lot more important to identify what platforms or platform work best for you, where your ideal clients hang out, and how you can reach them. And I can recommend, again, several really, really interesting resources that are very helpful in managing how we think about connection online. And also perhaps introduce the term you may have heard of, mindful computing. So how we relate to devices, how we engage with technologies, which have an enormous impact on our mental health and well-being. So I would strongly recommend the work of Alexandra Franzen, who is a very successful author and online coach who doesn't have any social media accounts. Cal Newport, computer scientist who pioneered the concept of deep work. And also Alex Pang, who talks about distraction and mindful computing. So a lot of very, very interesting work that you might want to look at outside the scope of this presentation, but this is also one of my pet topics, and one of the little classes I teach is digital detox. So I would like to finish with revisiting our first little self-inquiry and just doing a little exercise based on that. So checking again how we're sitting or standing or lying down, that our weight is equally distributed. This is quite interesting because it brings the awareness back into the body and just helps kind of release any tension and notice how we are in the space we inhabit. Coming back to that first question of what would make you truly happy. So just revisiting that. And let's think about what you would like to receive as support from others to make this happen. So if this is something related to professional development, maybe starting an online business, or maybe this is personal or health related, such as going back to this idea of tools to support yourself. Whatever it is, what is it you would like to receive as support from others to make this happen, to facilitate this at this moment? So just envision this happening as and when needed. And is there anything that you would like to let go of that is holding you back? Is there anything that is holding you back that you can release? And if so, if you've identified anything, feel free to jot this down. You can use the time to also envision that you are releasing this, perhaps even using the breath, releasing on the exhale. That's an easy physical connection to make, physiological connection to the breath, just releasing anything that's holding you back. Are there any skills or virtues that you need to grow in yourself? So is there anything you need to develop from yourself rather than others to help you in reaching what would make you happy? And if so, then again, why not visualize this happening? Perhaps even imagine that this is happening with every inhale. Imagine growing these skills or little virtues like seeds. So every inhale brings you what you need to nurture in yourself. Any transferable skills, perhaps, that can be used in other contexts. And lastly, what is it that you would like to give to the world based on your unique experience, your unique education, interests, your capacity? Something that makes you happy based on any of these thoughts. Is there anything you can share so that at the end of your life you really think back and think, yes, this was worth it? Envision this happening, envision sharing this, and everyone really delighted with these skills that you can give, your participation, the gifts to the world. And to finish, let's relate this to the here and now. So abstract as this exercise might seem, it can be really, really useful. And if we have time in the questions at the end, I will share with you what I visualized when I did this 2 years ago and how it panned out. But let's relate this to the here and now. What steps can you take today, right now, to bring yourself closer to what would make you truly happy? Don't wait until ideal conditions manifest. This is really important. What steps, however tiny and small, can you take right now, today, and tomorrow, and next week? I'm going to finish here. So you have your notes, you can revisit them, and we can speak about this in the question period. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xenia, for a very inspiring and relaxing talk for all of us to start off today. So let's hand straight over to our next speaker, Liz Doherty, please.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much to Sarah for inviting me here today. So excited to be here, part of this amazing panel of women, and absolutely loved Xenia's talk there. I think I'll definitely be signing up for one of your courses around performance anxiety, for sure. And really looking forward to hearing Gwendolyn speak later on as well. So my name is Liz Doherty, and I am speaking to you today from Buncrana in County Donegal. And it's lovely to have you all here with us today, and I'm loving seeing lots of familiar names among the group here. So hello, everybody. It's great to see you all. So I am going to use some slides for my presentation. I'm going to just share my screen here and use that to frame my conversation. So Sarah, if I'm happy to have the screen share, that is great. Thank you. And we'll go with this. Okay, so I am, as I introduce myself to people these days, I am a recovering academic. I have launched a new company in September of this year. So bang slap in the middle of a pandemic. I have this major life change going on, as we all are. And so I left 30 years of life in academia at the start of this year. And as I say, it took me until September. And then I launched a new company called I Teach Trad, which is for teaching, training teachers of traditional music and for supporting them in professional development then through mentoring, online courses, and so on. And my story is kind of slightly precedes the pandemic. I had my moment of reinvention some months ago. And that I really didn't like anymore. And when I got to the stage that I was looking up jobs of becoming a personal assistant to building contractors and stuff like that, and abandoning music, I think I had a big moment of like, okay, something is not right here, because music has always been the thing that lights up my life. And when I was seriously considering walking away from it all, I thought, right, definitely time for a change. And I went to London to a conference by an amazing woman called Sam Collins. She runs an organization called Aspire, and it was for trailblazing women leaders. And it was called MAD, so it was Make a Difference. And actually, that was the thing that drew me to it in the first place. The MAD word, I thought I could be doing with a bit more madness in my life right about now. And so off I went to London to this conference. And Sam Collins spoke about the stages of a woman's career. And she spoke about the first stage of it, up until your early 30s, that kind of time when you've graduated college, you're finding your feet, you maybe started your first job, and it's the period of idealistic achievement. And this was absolutely me. I had graduated from university in 1991 and started lecturing shortly after in UCC. And all great, happy days, all going according to plan. And then this phase starts then, the phase of pragmatic endurance, which kind of takes you from your mid-30s into your 40s. For me, I became a mother at 39. I have 2 boys now, so I was coming to motherhood at that stage. I was still in academia. I was playing and performing less and less. And gradually, as just life was taken over and doing the same thing over and over again, I absolutely felt I was in this stage of pragmatic endurance, which was increasingly turning into boredom and misery. And I was really having those conversations with myself, thinking, you know, is this it? Will I ever get back to touring? Will I ever get back to playing? Is this it? Is this it? And then Sam Collins gave me permission to change. She talked about the phase of reinventive contribution. Anytime from 46 on, I was 47 at the time when I went to this conference. And honestly, I just about leapt out of my seat and jumped up on the stage and hugged her. I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. I have the power to change this if I want to. I don't want to just keep on doing things the way that I've always done them, because it is not filling me with joy anymore. It's not speaking to my creative person. I want to reinvent. And I left that conference with a plan, a very vague plan. One was to stay with the job, pay the mortgage, pay the bills, and try and make myself happy in it. And the second one was, I'll give it a few months, and if it doesn't work, I need to, you know, bite the bullet and move on. And ultimately, that is exactly what happened. And that's the story I'm going to share with you guys today, and some of the processes that I went through in coming to that stage. I am a very happy recovering academic now. And despite COVID changing everything, it really, it meant that none of the plans that I had made for my life beyond academia came to be, but everything changed. That kind of courage and confidence and the freedom to reinvent was absolutely in place. So here are some of the areas, again, like Xenia spoke about. I did lots of reading, I did lots of research. I spoke to a lot of people outside of my own kind of comfort zone. I looked far beyond the world of traditional music to try and find myself in traditional music again. I'm a fiddle player. And my whole academic life has also been in traditional music. My PhD was on Cape Breton fiddling. I was teaching traditional music most recently for the last 13 years at Ulster University. And so my whole life was in traditional music. And even though I've always been one for kind of digging in deeper and deeper to the world that I'm in, this time I thought I'm going to go wider and search into kind of corners that I hadn't explored before. And one of the great books that I read, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is Carol Dweck's book on mindset. And she talks about the importance of having a growth mindset. And ultimately, that means that you're always learning, you're always growing. And one of the stark statements actually is that, well, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I was like, okay, not ready for that, carry on yet. I want to be back in growing mode. And reading this book really illuminated for me different periods of my own life where I was absolutely in a fixed mindset, where, you know, you wanted to be seen to have all the answers, where I wanted to be seen to have all the answers. I was afraid that the imposter syndrome that I was living with would be exposed. You know, you're doing all these amazing gigs, you're, you know, getting all these qualifications, getting these amazing jobs. And then behind it all, you're like, oh my goodness, people will really find out that I don't really have a clue what I'm doing. I'm making it up as I go along. And you can become defensive. I became defensive. I became small. I became closed down and locked down because I was afraid to continue to grow. And I'd look back over different periods of my life where I knew that I had definitely fallen into a fixed mindset. And I'd always managed to get myself out of it again, because that was definitely not where I was in my happy place, where I felt that I was living into my own potential. So having a growth mindset where you're up for learning, where you're up for trying, where you're up for challenging yourself, for stretching yourself, that absolutely is just reminded me when I was reinventing myself that that was critical to my growth and to my own development. Mine your experience. There is gold there. This is something else that, and again, Xenia spoke to this today. You know, we often look at our creative practice and we look at our musicianship. I looked at my, you know, academic life. I was looking at my life as a musician, as a fiddle player. But it's important to look beyond that as well. Dale Carnegie, for example, tells us that 15% is all about what you know. So that was my musicianship, my academic credentials, all of that. And everything else that allows you to succeed in life is about your personality, all those characteristics and traits, all those other soft power assets, the things that you don't necessarily think of first and foremost. You're not going to put them in your CV. You often take them for granted. So if you're an encourager, if you're a motivator, if you're inspirational, all those characteristics and qualities and values that other people see in you that often you don't give yourself credit for, that's really, really important. So again, I started with an audit of the hard power assets, which are, you know, all those things you can quantify on paper, your degrees, your years of experience, how many recordings you've made, how many gigs you've done. But the interesting bit was the rest of it. What do you really like? What lights you up? What can you bring? What can you give to other people? And that's where you start to get the broader picture of where your capabilities are, of where your real potential is. And then if you can marry those all together, that's where the gold is. So mine your own experience, find your own story and look for it all. A big piece and an ongoing learning piece for me, again, and it comes back very much to the growth mindset, is, you know what, just don't be afraid to be seen learning in public. It's okay to be seen to be a lifelong learner. And sometimes you'll fail, sometimes you'll not learn very quickly, sometimes you'll get it wrong, but it's okay. We're only human. We can't get it right all the time. And this is something that as a traditional musician, and as you know, being somebody who's been very close to the traditional music community for decades at this stage, that I had taken some time to really look into with my academic hat on, because I was seeing from a lot of younger learners in particular that there was a sense that you get to, you know, your early 20s and your learning stops. We're kind of very good in the traditional music world of providing lots of learning opportunities, workshops, all of that for learners starting off and in those early years. But as the learner becomes more experienced and as they become more independent in their learning, everything dries up. And you have to be so self-sufficient, you have to seek it out, you have to really dig deep, and sometimes it's not there to be found or it's hard to find. And then I looked at our more expert, our master players, and thought the reason they're so brilliant and the reason they're all of our heroes is because they're learning all the time. But maybe the issue is that we don't see these guys learning. We see the end product. We don't see the process. We don't see the hours of practice that, you know, the Liz Carrolls, the Martin Hayes are putting in on a daily basis. And what if we saw that the learning was actually for life, that everybody on their whole lifelong learning journey was doing this every day to get better? The learning doesn't stop. And so I developed this model called the Trad Lab, which kind of maps out the lifelong learning journey of the traditional musician and reminds us that we're all dealing with a perpetual cycle of learning, then applying that learning. And we're all about being the best musician, the best creative being we can be at any given time. And we're trying to grow and become the next level every single day. And so this is my effort at kind of conceptualizing the lifelong learning journey of the traditional musician and reminding myself as much as anybody that every day is about learning and growing and becoming. Getting out of our own way is also important because we can become a bit precious about ourselves. And again, this totally links back to the growth mindset, doesn't it? That we're, you know, we reach a certain level and we're afraid then to kind of try something new because that might, you know, undermine everything we've achieved so far. And I read a great thing, which I'm going to share with you here, about Harper Lee, who wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, and then didn't write anything else for decades afterwards. And this is in a book called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, which is called Creative Living Beyond Fear. And it's absolutely one of my favorite books. But in speaking about Harper Lee, this is what she said. I wonder if perhaps she had become pinned beneath the boulder of her own reputation. Maybe it all got too heavy, too freighted with responsibility, and her artistry died of fear. Or worse, self-competition. And you know, we all talk about that second album syndrome. You do your first album, it goes great, all of that, and then it's like, oh, I have to follow that. And sometimes it's easier not to bother following it because, you know, where do you go? How do you get better? And what if you don't? And again, that fear of failing, that fear of, you know, freezing yourself almost so that you don't want to keep growing is a real thing within our artistic community and our creative community. So something just, we need to get over that. We also need to get over perfectionism. And I don't know how many of you guys kind of are crippled with that perfectionist trait. I know I definitely am. And, you know, as wise people have said, you know, perfectionism stops people from completing their work. It often stops people from beginning their work. So again, Xenia spoke about this. It's about the small steps. Don't wait for it to be perfect to do it. Go for it. If it fails, it doesn't matter. Something I read that actually helped me a lot in those moments when I was setting up my new business, going, oh God, everybody will hate it. It'll be terrible. Nobody will like it. Everybody will laugh at me. Was a line in a book that said, look, there are people who are not even born yet who are going to hate what you do. So you know what, just get on with it, get over it. And I thought, how true, how true. And this is a line that I use all the time when I was working with PhD students. Done is better than perfect. Just get it done, pass it on, get on to the next thing. Don't wait for perfection. The last thing then, of course, is to look after yourself. And Xenia spoke so beautifully about that and offered us real practical tools to make that happen. And it's so important to put on your own oxygen mask first. They tell you that on airplanes. Remember those things we used to be able to jump on and go places? But they tell you that, don't they? Put on your own oxygen mask first. You can't be of any use to anybody else unless you're fulfilled, unless you're safe and well. So looking after yourself is a priority. Some of the practical things then that helped me as I was developing I Teach Trad over the last number of months was, it is important as well as your creative practice to give time to the business side of things. I had been self-employed for a period previously. I'd given up academic life around 2000 for the first time. Clearly, I didn't learn my lessons and dived back into it. But anyway, I was horrible at being self-employed the first time, absolutely horrible at it, because I loved playing music. I was a full-time performing musician at that stage. I was touring all over the world, recording. I was so busy doing the work, loving the work, that I forgot, I didn't get the memo that, okay, this is a business. This is not like an extended summer holiday. You have to deal with the money. You have to send the invoices. I mean, really, I often didn't get around to sending the invoices. And then you have to put the checks in the bank. Thankfully, with online banking, I'm saved that chore now. But you must give time to the business side of things. It doesn't need to be much time, but you do need some systems in place to keep yourself sane, because if you ignore it, bury the head in the sand, the business side will ultimately be the thing that breaks you. So a few simple systems, get advice if you don't know how to do it, and just stick to the schedule and keep a handle on that all the time. One of the things I have learned, I've had loads of help, loads of coaching, loads of mentoring myself over the last number of years. And something that I've become a lot better at is the whole process of reflection on a regular basis. And even something as simple as doing a weekly roundup. So on a Friday, I don't finish my week's work until I ask myself the following questions. What went well? What didn't? What did I learn from it all? And then what will I do differently next week? And that also helps shape the planning going forward, because otherwise, I mean, I'm a total workaholic and I love getting so busy and so deep into the work that I can forget all of this. And it's great when it's going well. And then when it all goes pear-shaped, it's a disaster. And so just a small routine like this, a small habit that I've kind of found that muscle and built it up, has made a massive difference to me for sure. There are so many supports available. I guess this is one of the positive outcomes of the pandemic is that there are all kinds of supports available. Music Network has been doing amazing work in supporting artists, as have lots of other organizations. Some of that support is financial, and often our instinct is that, okay, the bank account is low, we need to look for the funding, But honestly, sometimes it can be the other supports that are far more beneficial. I had never previously considered, I guess because I'd never thought of myself as having a business before, but I'd never looked to the local enterprise boards before. I was always looking to the Arts Council and to kind of creative supports that way. But the local enterprise board have been phenomenal in helping self-employed people. And I had all kinds of mentoring and training from the local enterprise office here in Donegal. So do look beyond those supports that you may have looked to in the past. Ask other people, where are they getting help? People are happy to share this kind of information. And, take it all, look at it all, and then consider what are the best steps for you. And I know, all the support there for recording albums is there. It's all brilliant, but don't just focus on the short term. Think, what are you going to do with this in the long term? How is this going to help you, and how are you going to move it on to the next stage? All of us, of course, have been learning and growing for sure as we've had to moving everything online. And absolutely, we need all to try new things and find out what can help us to move on and to grow and to develop and to stretch ourselves. But there also comes kind of the moment of reality where you can find that you're adopting a scattergun approach and you're trying a bit of everything and you end up kind of doing nothing. It's, again, Xenia spoke about social media, and you can end up with accounts on everything and actually keep nothing live and keep nothing going because you're pulled in too many directions. So find your lane and dig deep and try out new things for sure, but really find your voice, find your lane. And then anything that's not working for you, anything that's going to take too much time or effort, or that you're just simply not good at, or it's going to take you too long, it's going to hold everything up, outsource this, or absolutely outsource this. Anything to do with finance now, I just shove it off to the accountant. I've given up trying to deal with it. I keep my systems, and then I'm like, this is not me. And then I have to compensate for that financially in another way then. And I've had to learn to do some things that I would love to be outsourcing, but I can't afford to. But we can't be all things, and we need to really be sensible about this and do what we can and be brave enough to invest in ourselves and to let some things go. And it is, just when I say that, it is really important to invest in yourself. Sometimes we're kind of going, we don't want to spend money on doing a course. We don't want to spend money in paying somebody to help us. We don't want to spend money on outsourcing things, but we have to. That's the premise of any business. And we need to kind of bring that into our thinking as well and give ourselves permission to do that. And the last thing is to find somebody to help you. Find a mentor or find several mentors. Again, there are lots of coaches out there, lots of mentoring services. Invest in yourself to do that. I love this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson saying, our chief want in life is somebody who will make us do what we can. And we all need that. Maybe not make us do, but help us to do what we can might be a more gentle way of doing that. But definitely, for those days when it does get overwhelming, for those days when you're doubting yourself, when an imposter syndrome is taking over, it's brilliant to have somebody that you can speak to, not just a friend that you can kind of rant and rave at and give out to and, moan and who'll sympathize, but somebody who's going to get you back on track and make you think into what you're all about and get you living up to your own true potential. Because look, absolutely, the time is now. It really is. We have to take this moment and make the most of it. We were talking before we started this, thinking, we were talking about Christmas and how weird a Christmas it's going to be. And honestly, one of the things that I've been thinking this last while is, yes, we can't see lots of people. We can't be pulled in all the busy gatherings that we normally have. But, in years to come, maybe this is the Christmas that all our children will look back and enjoy, that they had so much mommy and daddy time, so much close family time. So the time for everything is now, and let's make it the best that we can in the circumstances that we're finding ourselves. And just because it is my favorite book of the moment, I'm going to leave you with a little quote now from Elizabeth Gilbert one more time. This is like story time with Liz here, but I'm going to leave you with this. You have treasures hidden within you, extraordinary treasures, and so do I, and so does everyone around us. And bringing those treasures to light takes work and faith and focus and courage and hours of devotion. And the clock is ticking and the world is spinning, and we simply do not have time anymore to think so small. So grab this moment, go for it. And thank you.
Thanks, Liz. I do apologise, everyone. I've got a very loud noise in the background, so I'm going to hand straight across to Gwendolyn Mason now.
Thank you very, very much, dear Sarah, and thank you to everyone who is here today and watching. I'm very, very grateful to be a part of this, and I'm very excited to be able to share some of my thoughts on life and on one of the reasons that I have been invited to speak to you today. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my thoughts on being a musician and being an artist. I think that two of the continuous briefs inherent to being an artist are, first of all, giving back to the community if you can, and also enabling others. Since many years, I've carried around with me a wish to create a place for musicians and artists to be able to experience a retreat as opposed to a straightforward music course. I feel that for us to live in and through music, we need a place where we can begin an inner journey to understanding without outward expectation. We need a place where we can learn to exhale. I have wanted to create that retreat where at the end there is no concert for the audience. The connection we build is to ourselves and to our community, so that when we do go back on stage, we have a sense of having discovered something about ourselves and music that allows us to storytell and perform music with utter commitment, passion, conviction, and stage presence. To be in the moment, freed of concerns of what everyone else is thinking, and completely engaged in the contract we have gone into with the composer we are playing. After years of somatic study and practice, and my own journey through repetitive strain injury, I designed the exhale early on in 2019. Pregnant with the creation of the first exhale that was to take place at the Lake of Biel in Switzerland, as well as pregnant with my first child, I put things together with the help of one assistant. The exhale offers musicians a safe space to pause, explore, and refresh, free from the competitiveness that we are only too familiar with, and open to inclusion of people and subjects that aren't generally found in institutions. It is part of my objective to destigmatize the vulnerability that is part and parcel of being a musician, and to see that vulnerability as a precious strength. Behind the discipline, professionalism, and creativeness that music making demands, I recognize a need for an internal well-being, both emotional and physical. My vision is a retreat for professional, students, and amateur players alike, with exceptional music making, running alongside sessions for the mind and body. The Exhale originally hosted 11 artists who would guide participants along various paths through music, movement, coaching, and nutrition. World-class instrumental teaching would be intermingled with yoga, explorations in nutrition, choir singing, Alexander technique, psychology, Feldenkrais method, dyskokinesis, improvisation, meditation, breath awareness, and coaching. The Exhale had 48 participants initially who would come from all over the world to gather and learn and to spend 1 week together. The idea was not to enable people a complete oversight of something like yoga that takes a lifetime to practice, but to offer them a chance to experience it, and if they found pleasure with it, to when they return to their own community, continue their study and exploration of it. Like everything else, the exhale has been impacted by the necessary measures against the spread of COVID-19. During a time when the live music experience has, by and large, little option other than to admit defeat, I decided to rise to the challenge and rethink. As Goethe wrote, fresh activity is the only means of overcoming adversity. Instead of cancelling the exhale, we brought it online. I see a growth in feelings of isolation and loneliness since a number of years, not just amongst musicians, but also amongst the general public. So I decided to ensure our classes are interactive and welcoming to all. We now number more than 40 core faculty members, 35 further guest artists, and a team of 7 bringing the classes to the public. We work together with teachers who are completely new and fresh to the world of pedagogy, because we want to encourage them and provide them with a platform that is so clearly lacking for those who finished their precious studies just before COVID hit. And we are very, very proud that we've had international stars spend time with us. From the likes of cellist Gary Hoffman and the violinist Gila Pop, our very own Irish star Finian Collins, and Zoe Conway, the Irish trout player, right through to international stars of somatics such as yoga practitioner Eddie Stern. I really want to continue to ensure that the exhale remains, in the words of one of our faculty members, a very special place where there is mutual respect and open trust for sharing resonating thoughts and ideas that come from an honest and sincere place in all of us. I have prepared a slideshow. It's a slideshow that shows, with a certain sense of humour, the steps that I went through and that I see a lot of people I hugely admire and respect going through in an effort to come to terms with a new world where we can reach so many more people with our art form, and to see that as an opportunity. So if you allow, and with no further ado, I will do my very best to show all of that upskilling I've done in the past 10 months and bring you through a little something. I've called this How to Get Out of Trouble Quickly. The exhale. How can a performer go from this to this? Well, you can try to make that jump by remembering what your mom always says. The first law of thermodynamics is that energy is never lost in the universe. It is just transformed. by being your own cheerleader, sometimes cheerleaders when it's a hard day. You are the universe discovering itself. It's okay if your inner cheerleader is a little bit mushy. By thinking on your feet or with your heart. By taking a moment to exhale. By remembering that between stimulus and response there is space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Rethink what you mean with live concert and be consistent until the time comes to change your mind. Dare to be radical and take necessary risk. In the words of Pippi Longstocking, I have never tried that before, so I think I should be definitely able to do that. This is an excerpt from Scales Flow, a community class that I teach every week at the Exhale on Tuesdays. It is open to all levels. I'm just going to show you a small, brief snippet of it. We host our classes on Zoom. Welcome to today's class at the Exhale. We're going to be doing a scales flow together. So I know that most of you are here because you love scales. And I also know that some of you are here because you really hate scales. Which is kind of good news for me because it means that you've been coming back a few times and you're letting me inspire you to start to love scales. So scales are a really, really important building block of our repertoire. It is one of the most common patterns that you'll come across in music, and it is really the backbone of what we can learn from a technical point of view together. Now, I've had a few requests. I've mentioned this to you in the past. I am your living scale jukebox. You can ask me every week what key you would like to play with me or practice with me. So what key you would like to practice, which scale system you would like to practice. You can choose what kind of element of technique you'd like to look at. And I'm starting to add every week some little surprises for you, just to see how we can make things as exciting as possible. At these classes, we generally have between 10 and 15 participants whom we share ideas with. Welcome. Do the work and involve people, create community and diversity. At the Exhale, we teach myriad subjects, including the following.
Hello, how are you doing? Hi, Liza. Great, thanks so much for coming along today. The idea of today's session is that we're just gonna learn a pretty straightforward reel completely from ear. So get your instruments ready. So this is how it goes. Okay, so we'll have a go just playing that first part of the tune, round and round and round. 1, 2. Once again. So now is the point when it's always nice if someone wants to volunteer and just play it out to the class. Who fancies having a go? Liza! Yes! Very close, very close. Okay, shall we move on to the B part now? I'll play it once for you in the slow tempo. 1, 2. Great. Everyone got that? Thumbs up? It's really funny for me here because sync, and so I have no idea. It looks like absolute chaos on my screen. I'm sure it's not in your rooms there.
I've got a bit of a problem. I basically only have an electric violin that is being plugged in. My real one.
I see. Okay, so we won't really hear it.
Yeah, I don't. It's kind of mad.
Go on, play the B part anyway. Let's hear how it sounds.
Okay.
That's great. Okay. Now, is it Joseph or Oliver up there with Helen? Joseph, hello. Very nice to meet you, Joseph. How are you doing?
Good, yeah.
How is the tune going there?
I can almost do it. He's doing little bits of it.
Yeah, that's exactly what to do. Just come in and out, and gradually as we go through the hour, you'll get more and more bits coming along. This is where it would be so lovely in real life if we were all just playing together and we could do it in twos and try all sorts of different things. But who knows? Maybe that will happen in the future. We can meet somewhere. So look, I'm going to play you now how that sounds. Again, this will be in a faster tempo, but you can hear how that sounds with the jamming part. Oh no, I just deleted it. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yes, I should have told you. I picked it because it's called Wee Donald in the Pig Pen.
Thank you.
And you can't see on your screen, but I'm very small. I'm very, very wee, so thought it was quite apt.
Dress up for the online world as you would for the stage. Well, most of the time.
Gwendolyn, just a couple more minutes if that's okay.
Sure. And never give up on quality or integrity. And if you want, we would like to let you know that if you wish to be a part of the Exhale, let us talk about your next session with us. We are opening up the Exhale to people watching from Music Network or all across Ireland. If you have a class that you would like to propose to us, that you would like to do with us, please write to us at the email addresses specified here. Or visit us online for a holistic approach to inspiring your well-being as a musician. Thank you very, very much for listening and for watching. I hope that it has been of some inspiration. And again, thank you to Music Network Ireland for giving us this opportunity to share with you.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation, and it was just lovely to see some of the activities at the Exhale happen here. Sarah has a JCB by the sounds of it in the room beside her in the concert hall just now, so she's asked me to just invite everybody to turn on their cameras and their microphones if you would like to ask a question, and if you just would like to raise your hand. Xenia, Gwendolyn, myself and Sarah are here, and indeed I'm sure lots of you guys have lots of information to share that we'd love to hear as well. So if anybody has a question, please feel free to raise your hand right now. Cormac, we'll start with you.
Oh, can you hear me first of all?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Just two very quick points before my question. It's refreshing to see so much emphasis today on the soft skills needed to be an artist. Things mentioned like yoga, having good mindset and breathing. I missed the first talk, but the second point I have, I mightn't be too popular in saying this, but I found the theme of the year with artists this year seems to be an inconvenience about the pandemic. And I, for one, want to voice that I feel there was a lot of more positives and benefits to be gained from this pandemic than negatives. So I just want to say I'm an optimist on the whole pandemic. And my question was in relation to an agent or a PA, I think, and what would you recommend for an artist? I mean, it's in relation to the personality of the artist, and they sometimes are not suitable for, say, administrative work or even social media work or technical work. And you touched on it, perfectionism there is something inhibits me, I feel. And yeah, so do you recommend some, or is that a ridiculous question, maybe something like, or should I, am I supposed to, anyway, do you recommend something like a PA or an assistant to, or an agent for an art? Is it a necessary thing?
Okay, will I go first and then Xenia and Gwendolyn, if you would like to jump in there as well. I guess, Cormac, for sure, there's, you know, it's all about the stage you're at in your career and what do you need. And obviously, once you bring people on board, there is an investment in yourself to make that happen. And again, it goes back certainly what in my own experience, at different times, I've had managers, I've had agents, and then there have been times where I've done things by myself. I think it's about really knowing and understanding what it is you need. Sometimes people can think, oh, I need a manager or I need an agent, but that may or may not be actually what you do need. So I would have the courageous conversation with yourself, first of all, is what is the job you're trying to get done? What is the gap you're trying to fill? And then is that the solution? Sometimes if it's more administration type work, if it's like booking flights and doing that sort of thing, hotel rooms, you know, if we ever get back, or just doing kind of general administration work, maybe something like a virtual assistant is actually what you're looking for rather than a manager or an agent. If you like the conversations with the venues and doing that side of things, there are some online services where you can avail of these skills kind of very cheaply for somebody to do kind of blocks of work, or the virtual assistant is a more sustained skill set, that service that you buy as well. So it would be really to think deeply into what it is you're looking for, what is it that you're wanting somebody to do for you, and then is a manager or agent the right fit for you, or is it actually something else? And sometimes I know that we can get those confused.
Thank you. I never heard of a virtual assistant. Thank you.
I think that was an excellent response, Liz, so I don't really have much to add except that I've also tried to do everything myself. I've also tried to hire somebody, so just depending on what works for you. Sometimes it can be really helpful to actually have someone else respond on your behalf. Also, it depends, you know, how comfortable you are, for instance, with things like negotiating contracts and fees can be actually helpful to have a different perspective.
Okay, thank you.
I very much agree with both Liz and Xenia, who both have C's of experience with this. I've experienced working with agents, managers, impresarios. I have experienced working alone. And in the meantime, I am looking for partners, work partners. I feel that I've learned a lot about what we do along the way, and I've interested myself as well in doing so, because I think that if between the two options of sitting at home waiting for things to happen and looking for someone and perhaps not finding them, or not knowing what we're looking for and just getting on with it and doing it, I find that once the energy is gathered and you start doing things, the energy is like a magnet. It draws people to a project, and I think you will find the people you're looking for as soon as you know exactly what it is you want.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gwendolyn. Okay, anybody else like to ask a question? Yes, Patrick. Sorry.
I'm somebody who's, I've worked for about 30 years in education. I'm just about to leave the organisation I work for, and I've got a free world ahead of me at the moment. So I'm looking at all the options that are around in that. But my question really just quite a simple one, really. When performing, or when performing online or live, you're just about to step onto a stage and the gremlins come into your head and say you're going to get that wrong. Do you have individual tips you use to bring yourself back grounded straight away?
Okay, Xenia, would you like to start that?
Sure, yeah. So, well, there's a lot to say there. And yes, there are many approaches you can try. I think it's about trying a lot of things and then finding what resonates with you. And you can take some and you can leave the rest. But having, one just very simple practical thing that really helps me is I find that it's impossible to reason with myself intellectually in those moments when those old neural networks start firing and it goes in a loop. So it's really good to take yourself literally out of the head and into the body. So if you can do something that makes you move gently and maybe just release any tension, I can show you. If you want to join me, whoever wants to join, please stand up. So if you just find a comfortable standing position, so hopefully you can still hear me, feet hip width apart, knees are soft, so not locked, and just shake out from the wrists, being mindful we're not overdoing, inviting the elbows and the shoulders, and just shake side to side. Doing that for just a few seconds or a couple of minutes, noticing the flow of the breath, so we're not holding the breath, transferring the weight from foot to foot. Very simple, but immediately takes the mind out of the body, out of the mind into the body, and also warms up the body in terms of encouraging blood flow, because we know that when we're experiencing fight or flight, circulation is diverted from extremities. We might get cold hands, for instance. So this can encourage that to reverse. So that would be my tip, but there are many, many, many more things you can do. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Gwendolyn, have you anything you would like to share?
Yeah, I very much agree with what Xenia says. I have a lot of experience with having an attack of nerves just before I go on stage. And I've gone through all kinds of phases trying to figure out how to help myself. So I agree. What sounds to be an easy answer is not meant that way at all, which is to exhale. I find very often that when we're tense or nervous or very excitable, we don't consider our breath at all anymore. And like Xenia says, we're so much in our heads that we forget our physical existence. We're literally so much in our heads that we are no longer in our body. And we need to get back into our body, because that's what's going to be our primary instrument at the end of the day. When we go on stage, no matter what instrument we play, the body is always our primary instrument. And after having spent years also looking for answers, much like yourself, I think it's really important that as musicians we see ourselves as people who move, as enablers, and that we understand that we are athletes to a certain extent and start treating ourselves that way, instead of just assuming that we should be self-sufficient and just know how to play our instrument, be that violin or cello, recorder, whatever. We need to get the mindset of an athlete. Studies have shown that the amount of hormones that we exude and adrenaline is akin to a high performance athlete. They've done studies in Switzerland at the school here at the university with high performance athletes and soloists, and they've seen that the main difference between the two is that many performers don't have the physical health and well-being and training to cope with all the adrenaline, whereas an athlete will. Not only are we athletes, we're also interpreters. So while most athletes, not all of course, there are exceptions, but while most sports are about being fastest, quickest, or most strategic, we as musicians are also interpreting. We are actors, we are characters. We go on stage, we present ourselves from the very first footfall that we have on stage, and from that point on, people have paid tickets to come and be in our world and share with us. So I think that one of the things that you can do to help yourself is to get an understanding of the space you're in. So that includes the space of your body, the space of your mind, and that includes the visualization of the space of the stage you're in, understanding how far the walls are away, understanding how high the ceiling is, and rather than going, oh my God, going, oh wow, this is going to sound so much better than in my pokey little living room. I mean, this is just going to be an acoustic dream. And I think you'll see that there's going to be always, well, there's not, but in many cases there, shall we say, just for the sake of a brief answer, two kinds of musicians or performers. They're the ones who come on stage. They're brilliant, by the way. Yeah, they come on stage, they do their thing, they are amazing. They walk off stage and you're like, that was amazing, but I didn't feel like it was meant for me. It feels like there's a plastic kind of shield between this incredible performer and you, the audience. And the difference between, for example, an old Hollywood star such as Audrey Hepburn, for example, and this nameless, fantastic classical musician, I'm just going to use a classical format because that's what I know best, is that an Audrey Hepburn would have taken you, Patrick, or Liz, or Xenia, or any of the people on this call into consideration because she would have suffered exactly the same anxiety before going anywhere. So she probably would have gone, okay, you know what, hold on, these people are my friends. And these people do not have expectations. Their only expectation is to get away from whatever it is that brought them into that concert hall and to be in my world. So when you visualize, take your audience into account. So be on stage, get a feeling for the space of your body, your mind, your peace, make space all around you and include your audience into that factor. Practice that, it's a matter of training. When you go on stage, acknowledge them because they will feel included and it will be a completely difference for you. It'll be a different journey and for your audience as well.
Thank you so much. That's brilliant advice.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Gwendolyn. I'm briefly noise-free, so does anybody have another question?
I just have just a quick comment on that. What Gwendolyn was saying. Just a quick comment. I finished my formal studies in 2001, 7 years of university and 20 years of piano tuition, and Alexander technique or yoga or RSI or injury, it was never mentioned. And I hope that it has changed in 2020. That's all.
Thanks, Cormac. Yeah, I think by the sounds of it, it is changing, which is great news for everybody. Any questions, anybody? Do raise a hand if you have one. I don't see any more. Oh, I see a question. Maria. Just take your mic off, your mute off there.
How about now? Can you hear me? No?
Yes, we can. I was doing.
Okay, listen, I was an orchestra musician for years and years and years, classical. And my only observation is that when you saw the soloists coming in, you know, you play your overture and there is usually a soloist in the middle and then you finish. That's a classical concert normally. So you have ladies, you have young ladies, you have old ladies, whatever, coming in long dresses, gorgeous makeup. And two things which I had been observing. The one type of person who comes through the hall, goes there, hardly goes and bows and plays. And the other one who comes through, puts the hand on the instrument, maybe on the piano, looks up, goes inside, and eventually starts. So outward, that's what you see. Inside, probably, the one had been practicing days on days before a concert. Coming through, play. Take a breath and play. Don't think, don't look. You know what it's going to look like. You know what it's going to sound like. Forget about what you are doing. Just think that you are still in your own room and you are doing what you want. The other one had been practicing. Go inside. Take a big breath. Make contact with your public. Maybe look at one person who you like. Certainly not one who doesn't like you, okay? Not one who is writing, not the critic. So try to go and find a sympathetic eye and then decide this is the person I'm playing to. Well, this is what I observed. Whether that helps or not, I don't know. I just wanted to go and tell it to you. And thank you for a very entertaining hour, which I really appreciated before I start teaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
So if there's no other question, I might just ask a question to close off here of all of you. How do you balance a performance career with your other interests? Are there any challenges associated with that, or do you enjoy having that balance? Gwendolyn.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a great question. I have always enjoyed having various things to spend my time with that all lead back to the same thing. So music is my thing. And I have found that I am not very good at doing holidays. So where other people might really, really yearn for that 2-week holiday on a beach where they're just left alone and they can read and enjoy the sunshine or be with friends or whatever it is, of course I love that. But my problem is that after around 2 days, my mind either goes into a sort of boredom, which is not a nice feeling for me, or it gets very creative and starts coming up with new ideas, which is also very dangerous, because those new ideas mean that there's going to be less and less time for me to focus on projects and really see them through from beginning to end. At the end though, each switch for me is like a holiday. So practicing for me is absolutely wonderful. I love practicing in the meantime. I didn't when I was 5 because I didn't see the purpose of it. I love playing concerts. In the meantime, I love the whole process. I absolutely love playing with other musicians. I love collaboration. I love learning. I believe that an artist is an eternal student in some sense. So in between, for example, teaching, which is something I've done for many years, my mind will get so filled with ideas that I will write in order to put those down on paper so that those ideas are there and I have freed up space, it feels like, in my mind to go back to appreciating that moment of practicing. And the same goes for being online. I've learned so much from the participants that come to us at the Exhale. I've learned so very much from how they exchange with us, what they say to us, what they divulge, the ideas they have, the thoughts they share, the vulnerabilities that they share, which has emboldened us so much. I've seen during this time of COVID, if people are honest about it, I've seen a lot of more and her voice breaks. I've seen a lot of mourning. I've seen a lot of sadness. I've seen a lot of, don't dare to say depression, but I would certainly dare to say very somber, sad faces. I've seen a lot of devastation. I have seen a lot of unemployed people. I know people who play French horn who are currently bricklaying on building sites in order to make ends meet. I see devastation. I see orchestras folding. I see concert halls closing. I see desperation. And if we as a community, rather than feeling that we're one of the sectors most hit, because we are, with no perspective, no understanding of when we can go back on stage, no understanding in some cases of when we can teach in real life again without having to worry about our students or ourselves, I see this online world as one in which we can enter as opposed to escape, and live a part of what it is that we've been missing. So for me, it's hugely welcome. The balancing act is one that gives a lot back to myself and faculty members and participants at the Exhale.
Thanks, Gwendolyn. Anything else to add, Liz or Xenia?
I'd just like to say that it's an ongoing process in terms of balance, isn't it? You know, I mean, I wish I could say I have this solved, and I definitely don't. So sometimes I feel like I'm on top of things. Sometimes I feel completely scattered and like I'm just not really managing. And that's okay. And I suspect it will just continue being a balancing act and continually learning. But, you know, it's also interesting that different interests can feed and inspire each other. So we can take so much from different environments as well. And I find that really, really helpful. I don't know if Liz has anything to add.
Yeah, no, it's exactly the same. It really is trying to balance it all. But I know for me, it's when the performance part goes, it's like the glue that holds it all together. It's like kind of the center of it all. And if that doesn't get kind of looked after and tended to, the rest kind of loses its meaning a lot. So but you know, whether performing is performing for other people, or you know, as Gwendolyn was saying, it's about practicing. I think it's about playing my fiddle, and that's once I can make time to kind of do that often, everything else kind of stays on track, and then sometimes I get to do it more, and that's okay, and that's great. But as long as I'm playing that every day, that's what counts.
Great, thank you.
Sarah,
yeah.
will be time for one more question?
One more.
Thank you. Quickly, how will I say it? Therapy. I'm wondering if the panelists recommend a sort of therapy, because I mean, mental health is not as taboo as issue as it used to be. And you know, everyone suffers from some kind of psychological difficulties. But I feel the artist lives with a pretty unique type of psychological condition, and I've often found it difficult in life to find therapy that is suitable for the artist. I find it more so online than in actual one-to-one. So just wondered, would anyone have any comments on that? Like someone did mention, I think Liz mentioned perfectionism. I mean, that's a difficulty I feel sometimes an artist exclusively has, and can hinder from their productivity. And I found therapy, so a lot of therapy doesn't really honest word is can't really relate to that, or not quite understanding of the artist's mind or situation. Thank you.
Would anyone like to take that?
I'm very happy to share some thoughts on it. I would like to state immediately from the very get-go that my thoughts are only as an observer. I'm not a psychologist. Having said that, there's a very nice anecdote from one of my teachers, Igor Ozum, who I very much admire. He's now deep into his 80s, who, when I first began studying with him, I mean, he was somebody who really required perfectionism, I should say, from his students. His students are the types who have won massive international competitions. You're familiar with them. They are the leaders of orchestras. They are superstars. For example, Patrycja Kopaczinskaya is one of his very famous students, and if there's anyone who knows what she's doing, it's certainly her. So the pressure of being in his class was already the very first trial that we had long before we would go on stage. And I remember him saying to us, because he treated us all very differently, and I often wondered why. He said, I'm not a psychologist, but I am a great psychologist. And looking back, I see what he was trying to say. He went a long way to try and understand the personalities of his students. But essentially, he wasn't a psychologist. And finding someone who understands the minds of a musician and all the pitfalls and all the vulnerabilities, and also having a musician who feels comfortable talking about that to a person, that is a very difficult marriage to make. At the Exhale, we feel hugely grateful to the fact that we are able to work together with Emma Black. Emma Black is a former cellist. She is the psychotherapist and counsellor for the Guildhall School of Music in London. And she has been working with musicians who are suffering from various issues, or if not suffering, simply need someone to talk to find understanding with for many years. And she's sharing what we call community classes with us at the Exhale. A community class has been devised so that people can join in and not have to consider the financial burden that would occur if going to a psychologist in real life. Psychologists demand a lot of money, and they should. They've done a lot of study. And at the Exhale, we're trying to, as I said before, destigmatize these things. Mental health is important, and a musician should feel that their vulnerability is a strength. So some flamboyant open advertisement for the Exhale. If you're looking for someone to speak with, Cormac, that might be somebody you may wish to approach. As I say, it's very much to do with personalities as well. And I do think that people who have experience of being on stage and have then done a professional psychology degree might be able to best help you.
Thanks very much, Gwendolyn. That's great advice. So I'm conscious of the time. I think we need to wrap up now. So it remains for me to thank all of today's wonderful speakers for sharing so much of themselves and their experience of extending your practice online. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of the speakers across the whole series who've contributed to this professional development course. And thanks to all of you for attending and for your great questions today. And we certainly hope that you found some valuable takeaways from today and from the whole series. And do look out for the series of recordings which will be made available on the Music Network YouTube channel in January. So remains for me to say goodbye and a Merry Christmas.